and came to my daughter with this batch of soured milk, or as I now know it to be fermented milk, and agreed to drink it with her. 3, 4 days, we both drank the kefir. Her stomach ache went away. I had a constipation issue, and that was just alleviated. So now I had two pluses, which got me researching. If your gut microbiome is out of balance, and if the integrity of your gut lining, which is often called a leaky gut or gut permeability, if those things are compromised, you're on the road to, unfortunately, a lot of disease and a lot of illness. Because once you start to look for the patterns and you become aware of them, you'll realize this food is hurting me. Now we've got a huge problem with depression and anxiety, but the problem is actually the gut, because the food we're eating is destroying the microbes that are producing the serotonin. But if you're not addressing your gut, if you're not putting back the microbes, if you're not reducing the inflammation, healing the lining, that depression is not going to go away. So if you want to take pills forever, that's awesome. But eventually you're going to feel a bit like a zombie, because continuous use of antidepressants just eventually causes this flat line of emotion. To be a member of the Gut Health Association, your products or services need to do primarily three things. One, not damage the microbiome of the host. Number two, they must not damage the lining of the stomach. And number three, we ask that they don't damage the macrobiome. And we're actually in the process at the moment of submitting our application to the Department of Health to have our gut-friendly logo verified and certified.
Greetings, seekers of ancient wisdom. We're here for another exciting show today, and we're talking all about gut health. So today I'm joined by Bronwen. She's the founder of NUMESA and Gut Bar, and the founder and an associate member of the Gut Health Association. Bronwen, I hope I got all that right.
You did, Deepak. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
So, Bronwen, the gut is something that interests me a lot because my gut has given me problems my entire life. And I'm very grateful for that, because through my gut is how I found a better health. So I wanted to understand, why are you obsessed with the gut, and how did you get into, all these gut related companies and the movement, I guess.
So, Deepak, originally it started off because my daughter, who's now 27, at that point she was about 13, 14. She was really, really struggling with gut-related issues. And as I started journeying and trying to find out more, I realized how little I understood and how little I knew. And I was very fortunate at the time that there was a lady who I was in fellowship with who told me about these kefir cultures. She said to me, I promise you this is going to sort out your daughter's problem. And I resisted at the beginning because she was offering me some kind of weird, strange, funny looking cauliflower goodies that I had to put into ferment and essentially make what felt like a frothed milk or a sour milk. I presented this to my 13-year-old, and she was like, no, I'm not drinking that. I don't care how bad my stomach is. I'm not touching the stuff. And hence the problem continued, and I kept looking into the medical space to see if I could find solutions there, and there was very little. I could either drug her, essentially, give her medication to suppress the problem, and painkillers almost to hide the issue, but we still weren't getting to the root of the issue. And so I went back to Anne, who was the lady who originally offered me those first cultures, and she gave me another batch. I took them home, fermented them again, and came to my daughter with this batch of soured milk, or as I now know it to be fermented milk, and agreed to drink it with her. And we started on this journey. And for 3, 4 days, we both drank the kefir. Her stomach ache went away. So that was the first thing, which obviously impressed me. And I was like, okay, we'll carry on drinking the frothed milk. But what was interesting is I had a constipation issue, which it's just what women have. Women have constipation. It is what it is. We don't talk about it too much unless we're whining and bitching to one another, and we definitely don't talk to the boys about it. But many, many, many women have constipation issues, and that was just alleviated. So now I had two pluses, which got me researching. And as I researched and I tried to find out more about this weird, funny milk called kefir or kefir, as it's known overseas, and I went down the most fantastic rabbit hole, and the more I learned, the more I understood. And the more I understood, the more I realized how vitally important it is. And as you start speaking to people, when you suddenly get called to something and you pick it up and it moves you and you're like, this is it, I'm gonna focus on this a bit. The more I researched and the more I understood, the further my journey in. So it was about 2 years of us using the kefir at home. My daughter's issues resolving unless she ate specific foods. So very specific foods made her sick. My problem was gone, and of course, then I started sharing. But I love knowledge, and I kept researching. And at the time, I was busy with a fantastic project with one of the big insurance companies doing potholes. And that project then came to the end, and I thought, well, what am I going to do now? And I had these kefir cultures, which of course had multiplied. I thought, let me test the marketplace. And I took it out into the marketplace, and the marketplace was ready to start receiving. And the more people I spoke to, the more serious I realized the problem was. And fast forward to now, we are 12 years later, 12 years later, 10 years of running NUMESA. So NUMESA focus, here's the kitty. I did warn you guys there was going to be a kitty that came into the video. Sorry about that. The more I researched, the more I realized it was important. So I started NUMESA, which is specifically focused on kefir. We make a range of milk and water kefirs, goat milks, coconuts, something for every lifestyle. And I realized that people needed as much information as possible about gut health. And that led then to Gut Bar, where we offer a selection or a grouping of products, should I say, because gut health is not just a one, you don't just take a probiotic and get better. You need probiotics, you need prebiotics, you need to address with the lining of the gut, etc. And then last year in 2023, we started the Gut Health Association of South Africa because over the years I've spoken to more and more people, and we all have this like, please, we have to share this information. It's vitally important. And so we've decided to collaborate and bring that information to the mainstream to share with the public and educate on the importance of gut health. So that's kind of my little bit of my backstory.
So when I was 13, I also had gut all the time. I was constipated, or I was having diarrhea, or my stomach was like, um, just grumbling and causing issues. And I had no idea what I was doing wrong, right? I mean, I just kept on eating my dairy every morning with the cereal, and I kept on eating tons of gluten, and my gut, I mean, I never connected those to my gut problems, because everybody was eating the same thing as me, and they were fine, or they didn't have as serious problems, right? Or maybe they didn't voice it out. So I never connected what I was eating to my gut. I just thought, I just got a bad gut. But I think I was about 23 or 24 when I came across a book about blood type. They said eat for your blood type or something. It was quite popular back in 2010. And I found my blood type. My blood type was O, and they said the O type, you need to stay away from gluten and dairy. So I tried that. So I was like, okay, let me try it. Uh, Let me rewind a bit. So there was a time when I was 23, I had constipation for 9 days.
You must have felt like a shit.
Yeah, I just did not know what was going on. I mean, I was constipated my whole life, but I never had such a long, severe constipation. And I was taking the laxatives, nothing was working. I even gave myself an enema, that didn't work. So anyway, luckily 9 days I ended up going to the bathroom. But that's when I decided, okay, something's not right. And I got that book. They suggested cut out gluten and dairy, which I did. And immediately, like within 2 days, my stomach stopped grumbling. I stopped having that constipation stuff. And then that sort of took me on my journey. So I'm is that really the main culprit, or are there many culprits for gut?
So food-based, definitely gluten and dairy are two of the big ones. The other ones would be your processed foods and your refined sugars. Seed oils also can often. So what you'll notice with all of these things that we're talking about is these have all been processed and are no longer what they were originally. So if you were, for example, taking milk and you were getting raw milk, preferably from a local dairy, the milk would contain various enzymes and bacteria which would work with your bacteria, and you would manage your raw milk. And I've seen a lot of people over the years who can't do uh, processed milk, or should I say pasteurized milk. But if they do raw milk, they've got no issue because the milk contains what they need. You know, nature's very clever. She puts everything we need. Then on the gluten side, gluten is probably one of our biggest problems, and it isn't always the gluten. A lot of the time, it is the processing of the gluten. So what we need to understand is that we've been spraying our gluten with pesticides uh, called glyphosate. I think a lot of you guys will know what I'm talking about. So for the farmer, they want to process the product as quickly as they can, and they need to get the wheat harvested in time. And what happened was a couple of years ago, quite a couple of years ago, a farmer discovered that if he sprayed his entire crop with glyphosate just before harvesting time, because it's a desiccant, it would dry up the whole crop and he could then harvest it. So he had a big storm coming in. He was like, let's see, this is a desiccant. Let me spray my crops and see what happens. And he sprayed it. And of course, the crop dried straight up and he harvested, and that was great. And he spread the words and told all his farmer friends, and everybody thought this was now great practice. But what they didn't realize is that glyphosate damages the gut microbiome tremendously. Glyphosate actually damages the whole body, but specifically the gut. And then your processed foods, your ultra processed foods, really are not friend of the gut. So usually when I'm talking to people and they're starting on a journey, we always say to them, keep it as simple as possible. You want that ingredients list to have the ingredients and maybe one or two other things. If the product has an ingredients list of 10, 20, 30 things, and it has a lot of preservatives, a lot of those E's, a lot of the sure, you know which ones I'm talking about. The ones that we think make the chips taste yummy. The problem is every single one of those yummies has a price that the body pays. The body cannot process those foods, or it can, but it becomes very toxic, and the overload becomes too much. So I'd like to, if I can, just explain a little bit about the gut and how it works so that you can understand why these foods are hurting us. So if you imagine your gut lining, my chubby fingers here, okay, so these are your villi, and this is the lining of your gut at the bottom over here. So just below the lining, you have a really big blood flow, which is representing your immune system. So your immune system is mainly housed in your gut. And the immune system, together with the lining and the villi and the microbes forming a nice big mucosal lining, they protect the immune system, if I can call it that. But when we start consuming foods that damage that lining, those little guys start to separate. And then we actually have undigested food proteins and toxins entering into the bloodstream, okay, through the immune system now. The reason that that is such a problem is that your body is not supposed to have, firstly, the toxins, and secondly, we shouldn't have any kind of undigested food proteins going through our bloodstream. And when that happens progressively over a period of time, they progress into what we then perceive as autoimmune. So we might start with a bit of constipation, some tummy issues, a bit of bloating. Then after a couple of years, we notice, flip, I've got a little bit of a sensitivity to gluten. And when I eat some dairy, I get a bit snotty maybe. And then a couple of years go by because we're like, I'm not giving up the cheese. There's no chance I'm giving up the cake. Bread is easy. And so we progress until our sensitivity now becomes an intolerance. So when we eat that beautiful, delicious croissant, the croissants are one of the favorites. We all love our croissant, but we noticed that for the next hour or two, we walk around like a little farting factory. As we're walking, constipation kicks in, the maybe little bit of brain fog, but we haven't really connected the dots. But what's happening is we've got that food starting to leak through, and the immune system is starting to get more and more upset. Progressed another couple of years. Now we have a full-blown food allergy. We cannot consume the food anymore. Our body has said there's no way. And by that time, we're usually manifesting a whole range of autoimmunes. So the interesting thing with autoimmunes is you start with one, okay? I might have a slight thyroid issue, for example. But if I'm not dealing with the triggers that are causing the body to become upset, it progresses and progresses and progresses. And now suddenly my one autoimmune is also an arthritis. And then it progresses from arthritis maybe into an inflammatory bowel disease. And so progressively we go on this horrible, horrible road of inflammation and sickness where it's one pill, three pills, five pills, and the system has then got us because now they basically essentially have to sell us chronic medication for the rest of our lives. Uh, and it's a no-win situation. Whereas if we had addressed the issues with the food in the beginning, and also if we kept that gut microbiome in place, they would have protected that lining. So the gut microbiome are, sure, I can't even tell you how many tasks they have. But in this context of the one we're talking about now, they are there to protect that lining. So you've got that thick mucosal lining, and they are protecting that very, very thin lining. So the lining of the gut is less than a hair thick. Okay, doesn't take much to go through there, which is why you need those microbes in a really, really thick mucosal lining to protect. They do a whole bunch of other things, but we'll kind of unpack those as our conversations go further into gut health, because gut health really affects every single level of your health. If your gut microbiome is out of balance, and if the integrity of your gut lining, which is often called a leaky gut or gut permeability, if those things are compromised, you're on the road to, unfortunately, a lot of disease and a lot of illness.
Yeah, I'm familiar with leaky gut, and I came across that obviously with my gut journey. And I like to think of your gut as the border of your country, and you're managing who's coming into your body. And once you have damaged your gut lining, then illegal aliens can come through the border easily. And then once they're in your, yeah, and once they're in your body, then the rest of your organs have very low security, like your endocrine system. You mentioned your thyroid, it's got very low security. The main security is your gut. But once the toxins or undigested food has broken through your main security system, then everything else in your body has got very low security. So it can easily get into your thyroid, your adrenal glands, and your whole endocrine system gets compromised, and then all these other issues um, start. I call them downstream issues. Upstream is your gut, and downstream is everything else: the autoimmune, the arthritis, the brain fog, the I guess it'll even affect your mood, right? So then emotionally, you'll have depression, maybe.
Big time. Because as you become more inflamed, as your body becomes more inflamed, so your irritation levels and your frustration and your anger will go up. Also, what you may find with a lot of people, once the constipation kicks in and there is almost swelling in the large intestine along the base, that you will have the back, it pushing slightly against the back of the spine. So over the years of doing this, especially when I was doing a lot of markets, I would speak to people and say to them, "Do you have lower back pain?" "Oh, yes, I do." And then they would be running off to this doctor and that doctor and having this therapy and that therapy. Meanwhile, it's really a colon problem. That colon is swollen. So I have a friend who lives in Waterfallboven on a very fantastic mountain, and her husband, or her partner, should I say, makes fresh bread. So I will be gluten free. I will arrive there clean, fresh, no inflammation, no pain. And on day one, out pops this fresh farm bread with butter and jam, and I'm undone. Like I know now, I have to take my own bread with me so that I don't become undone. But because I've now tested this, what I've noticed is that at about day 3 or 4, oops, there goes the cat off the table. Sorry, guys. If I partake in the bread by day 3 or 4, I'm firstly constipated. Secondly, I'm very aggressive. Okay. But it took me a while to realize what the aggression was from. So the aggression is the combination of the inflammation and the discomfort. I have the lower back ache, and then the brain fog kicks in. So most people don't associate the one to the other, and they haven't stopped the one thing long enough to see, okay, is there a pattern? Because once you start to look for the patterns and you become aware of them, you'll realize this food is hurting me. So an interesting thing on foods, if you have someone who is gluten intolerant or gluten sensitive, and they say, but I only eat gluten on the weekend. I'm good for 6 out of 7 days. I'm following the 80-20 or the 85-15 principle. I'm only having that one cream donut or that one slice of cake. What they don't realize is it takes anywhere between 3 and 6 weeks for your body to recover from the last assault. So they never actually come out of an inflammatory response. And the inflammatory response, because the body is so cleverly designed, the inflammatory response causes what we often call a cytokine storm, and everything is attacking. It's looking for issues. So something that might not have been a major issue now becomes an issue because your body, like you say, I love your border concept. These invaders have now passed through. Now we've released all of the border patrol and the extra army and the panic stations. These guys are now cruising around the body looking for something to kill. They need to fight something because all of the alarms in all of the systems are going off. So now your body starts attacking itself. And in the beginning, it's just 2 or 3 patrols are going out. But if we progressively continue to hurt our body, then they will continue sending out patrols, and eventually they bring out the bazookas and they bring out the big guns and they start bombing parts of our body in an attempt to destroy the thing that's hurting us. But the thing that's hurting us is coming in through the gut.
So let's get into the gut because I love the explanation you said. So there's the gut microbes, which I take as the bacteria, right? The bacteria and there's
Yeah, so let's just for simplicity there, Deepak, sorry, let's just unpack that. So we have the gut microbiome, which is the collective of all the microbes living in the gut. You also have a skin microbiome, nose, mouth. In fact, your whole body is covered with microbes. But in your gut specifically, you have the gut microbiome made up of microbes. Okay, so those microbes might be bacteria, there are parasites, we've got different kind of viruses, fungi, like there's a whole collection of them. In fact, they outnumber us, and the science varies at least 10 to 1, but possibly 100 to 1 in terms of human to microbe. Okay, so we really, really rely on these microbes. We just didn't know about it. Then you have so we've spoken about the microbiome and we've spoken about the microbes. Other words sometimes used for these are probiotics. Microbes are also called probiotics, or they sometimes referred to as the gut flora. Same thing.
so their main function, you said it helps to protect the gut lining, but I understand it also helps to digest the food. I mean, they're very involved in breaking down the food. And my understanding is there's good gut bacteria and there's like bad gut bacteria. And how I understand it is the good gut bacteria, when they break down foods, um, their waste is not harmful to your body. And the bad gut bacteria is a bit opposite. When they break down foods, their waste is harmful. I know that's a very simple way, but I'd like to just unpack that as we move on.
So I want to give you an analogy if I can, or an example. So we all have, you've heard probably of a hoho called strep. You know, the worst thing you want to get is strep throat. Strep is terrible. But we all have strep in our throat, the same way that we all have candida in our gut. So when you have a balance of the bacteria, the good and the bad as we know them, working together, you don't have a problem. So there's a story about the Yellowstone Park in the States where they had beaver and elk and wolves. And there was this beautiful, beautiful ecosystem. And the farmers complained that the wolves were stealing their calves. And progressively, they got rid of the wolves, they drove them out or moved them to different spaces. And we were left with the elk and the beaver. Now, elk are not bad creatures, and neither are beaver. But without the wolves there to cull the elk, and the elk that were managed, who then affected the trees, and the trees affected the beavers, what happened was eventually the river system was completely impacted. And the rivers went away. So the elk overgrew, the beavers left, and the whole thing became a big schmangle because they removed the wolves. So when they brought the wolves back, the whole ecosystem balanced itself back out. The elk were then managed, and the beavers were managed, and the water system came back. So it is exactly the same with us. If, for example, we have an overexposure to certain things and we kill off the friendly bacteria or the good bacteria, or the wolves, for example, that are keeping the elk, the streps, under control, now suddenly we have strep throat. Okay? It's the same in the gut. If we unbalance and kill off the good beneficial microbes, another microbe which may not actually be a foe when in a collective suddenly becomes a problem. So that is why we got to keep that balance and have as many different beneficial microbes as possible to keep the not so friendly guys under control. The other ones which do leave a big mess when we kill them off is parasites, Deepak. So parasites would also fall under microbes, I would say. They're definitely very small, but they leave a big, big mess when we're killing them off. And their waste products, should I say, cause toxicity, in the body. And the number of microbes is, sure, it's uncountable. Like you have so many strains. If you imagine a forest, in a forest, you've got big trees, small trees, you've got little plants, you've got the fungi underneath, you've got the mycelium. Your gut is very similar. You've got to have as many different kinds of little beings existing there because they do different things. From the moving the food along, which is why an imbalanced microbiome causes constipation. Okay, it's also why you're maybe not producing enough B vitamins because you've got certain microbes that take the food, process it. They're like little factories. They're amazing. They produce vitamins, they produce neurotransmitters. So I don't know if you know this, but 85% of your serotonin is manufactured in your gut by the microbes and the neurons. So the neurons fire, the microbes process, and between the two of them, you land up with a beautiful, beautiful bouquet of serotonin, which then travels up the vagus nerve to the brain. Now we've got a huge problem with depression and anxiety, but the problem is actually the gut because the food we're eating is destroying the microbes that are producing the serotonin. Now, we've all got anxiety and depression, which I've had. I mean, I've used antidepressants and they've saved my life on more than one occasion when the depression came too much. But if I go back and I do a bit of deep diving, what was my frame of mind? What was I eating? Had I possibly just done a course of antibiotics right before that? You know, and if I was treating my gut, would I have then potentially been able to prevent that depression, that depressive episode, and the requirement for those medications? So I'm not saying don't take antidepressants. Do what you have to do. But if you're not addressing your gut, if you're not putting back the microbes, if you're not reducing the inflammation, healing the lining, that depression is not going to go away. So if you want to take pills forever, that's awesome. But eventually you're going to feel a bit like a zombie because continuous use of antidepressants just eventually causes this flat line of emotion. We need to address the issue.
Yeah, I love that example because I've got family members who had depression. You go to the psychiatrist, and they gave my family member antidepressants. When I look deeper into it, one of them is called a serotonin blocker.
Serotonin reuptake inhibitor, SSRI.
What they did was they the psychiatrist said to my family member, "Oh, you're not feeling well. Don't worry, take this pill, you will stop feeling." So, you haven't really addressed the cause, but we're going to stop your feelings. So you're not going to feel depressed. You're not going to feel anything, but at least you won't be depressed. And yeah, I mean, now my family members on this for like 10 years, 12 years, and I can see that they've become so reliant on it that if they stop it now, then it becomes a huge drama and their body can't cope. It's almost like they're an addict, and they can't sleep and there's all these complaints. But it's amazing that all of that cause is the gut, and the medical system doesn't really understand that cause, and they just treat the symptoms, and the cause just keeps on continuing. And like you said, if you don't treat the gut, your depression is not going to go away. The medication is good for a short term, maybe to help you if you are struggling, but long term is not really addressing it.
No. And the other thing is that, if I've got something constantly propping up my arm, the muscles that are designed to hold up my arm are going to become weak. And then I will believe that I need this prop all of the time. But our bodies are divinely designed, Deepak, you know this. Our bodies are designed to heal and to fix, and our food is designed to be our medicine. The great creator said, like, I love you all, I'm going to give you everything you need, and it's all going to be here for you, and you just have to eat the food from the soil, and you will heal, which is how it was supposed to be. But we got into the processing, and we got into the production, and we got into the medicines, and we thought we were God, and we tried to fix it and make it all ourselves. But we removed those vital things, and then we just kept propping the body up. Now we can't take away the prop because the body will fail. And that's what happens when we over medicate for extended periods of time, is that the body forgets that it can do it, that it knows how to do it, and therefore it will stop making it, because why does it need to make it if it can just get a pill?
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. So let's get back to the gut microbe balance. So you said the balance is very important. It's not just having good gut microbes. You need the balance to have a healthy gut. So let's go into the next layer. The next layer is the lining, right? Is that the villi, or is there something like on?
Yeah, so you've got your lining, but you've got your villi is also covered with that lining. And remember, the reason you've got all of these little villi is because we want to affect absorption. So the goal is to absorb as much as possible and to produce. So you want to have as many layers as possible of these little absorption and production cells, if I can call them that.
Yeah, it increases the surface area. I read somewhere that if you were to stretch out all the villi in your gut, it would be like, a couple of rugby fields of surface area. So that's how much surface area is actually here. And like you said, more surface area for more absorption.
Correct. And also neurotransmitters. So your neurotransmitters, you've got more neurotransmitters in your gut than you have in your brain. Like, hold on a second, why would that be? And do you know that your brain communicates less with your stomach than your stomach does with your brain? So there's more communication going from the gut to the brain than from the brain to the gut.
And why is that? I mean, that's very interesting for me. Why are there so many neurotransmitters in a one-way sort of
I think the microbes are producing a lot of the building blocks or the things that the brain needs. So we're going to be producing, I've received this, I can make this, here we go, I'm sending it out. What do you need? Um, I have this, or I've been exposed to this, or I found this in my diet, or there's a toxin that's come in, you better get ready for it. Plus, we also know that we eat food often not just for nutrition, but to make us feel good, which is another form of addiction. What am I eating? If any of us, maybe you don't have a chocolate problem, but I, over the years, have definitely gone running to chocolate on more than one occasion to just try and pop my dopamine because I'm not feeling good. Little did I know I could go outside, do a couple of jumping jacks, play with the dogs, and actually feel better without the inflammation and the extra calories. But I'm used to the quick fix, so off I ran and have the chocolates. And when you're speaking to people, they'll often tell you, especially when you start, you start touching on, I, I'm not well. Great, I can see you're not well. Your body's inflamed, yes. Well, you're going to have to unfortunately stop these foods. And there's pushback. No, I can't leave those foods because I'm addicted to those foods. And a lot of those, if we, for example, talk about candida, candida I sometimes describe as the crack addict in your stomach. Like when candida starts demanding, like if you imagine the worst kind of crack addict that's now breaking into the house and holding their mother up with a gun because they're going to sell the TV because they need more drugs. Candida can behave a little bit like that. And you can have extreme cases where untreated candida will get into the brain and will manifest in the most horrible rages. So if we look at a large population, a large group of our population are eating genetically modified maize. And I don't know if you saw that recent Supreme Court battle that was won regarding the genetic modification of the maize, which is a serious win for us in South Africa. But they're being fed genetically modified food that's been sprayed with glyphosate. Okay, that is a high sugar. These are carbohydrates. So we've got inflammation, inflammation, inflammation. 3 times of inflammation. We're drinking Coca-Cola. We're eating processed foods. The candida level amongst these people must be ridiculously insane. So we've got no good microbes. And we're going to have a lot of rage and we're going to have a lot of anger because of how unhappy the body is and how high the inflammation state is. And then we judge the human being by their behavior and what they're doing, but in some way they actually don't have control. They can't control that rage and that anger because they've now been overtaken by this bad bacteria that is demanding constant feeding and makes them exceptionally horrible to the people around them. So there's that issue. There's also the issue that these microbes are conscious. These are conscious microbes. They work with us, they're for us, they are our friends. If those microbes are constantly being destroyed, if the gut microbiome is being killed off all of the time, how conscious can these people be? Correct, but we're not necessarily upgrading because our diet is keeping us sick. We're killing the microbes that could potentially help us to awaken. I'm not saying that the people who are making the food are aware of what's happening, but the reality is that it's a spiral that results in a lot of type 2 diabetes, a lot of hypertension, a lot of sickness, um, and people being dumbed down. They're literally staying dumbed down because the food they're eating is keeping them stupid.
Makes sense. So the foods you mentioned, they damage the gut microbes. Do they also damage the gut lining, or are they different foods? Some foods damage the microbe and some foods damage the lining.
So if the microbes are not there to protect the lining, so if you damage the microbes, you wipe them out, they can't protect the lining. Their job is to protect, one of their many, many jobs is to protect the lining. So as soon as we kill off the microbes, the lining then becomes unprotected.
So I wanted to touch on a bit deeper because when I did the research into gluten and dairy for myself, right, I found in my body, like over years and years of testing, I found certain gluten, like sourdough. If I have a sourdough bread from Jackson's or Fresh Earth or one of those places, my gut is actually fine. It doesn't complain too much. But when I have bread from the supermarket, all the brands, whatever, Albanese, Sunbake, all those guys, if I have one of those breads, my gut immediately starts reacting terribly. But they both have gluten in it, right? And you said it's just the processing. Is that the difference?
Yes, so your sourdough, they're taking they're causing a ferment and it's breaking down the gluten so that your body can process it. Also, most of your sourdough people, not all of them, but a lot of the sourdough people are using non-genetically modified, non-poisoned gluten. Okay, so Champagne Valley, for example, is an example of flour that is friend, not foe. So you may still have a reaction to it if you were making a normal bread, for example, with a non-GMO flour, but it wouldn't be as extreme as a highly refined flour. So what I've noticed, if, for example, you eat a white bread, a refined white bread, or that croissant we were talking about, or that pie, that is going to cause way more pain, inflammation, bloating than, for example, a seed loaf. A seed loaf, you've still got the fiber in there that your body can then use. And then you've got your sourdough next up. And then there are some really, really nice gluten-free flours out there, because we're finally starting to wake up and realize, okay, but we don't have to use wheat. There are other flours we can use and we can make bread. But I think we got so bloody lazy. We're like, this is just the way we do it. No, guys, come on, use those fantastic brains of yours and come up with new solutions. Like find other ways of doing it. So I had a bread recently at the Good Life show. This lady had it at the front of her stand, and of course I was like, "Are you sure it's gluten free?" No, I promise you it's gluten free. And I tasted it, and I was like, hold on, just another piece, another piece. And she's like, why are you eating my bread? I said, because it tastes like bread. And she made it with something called amaranth. Totally makes it like a normal bread. Take the flour, put the yeast, mix, 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 do its thing, rises, pop, bread. Wasn't so hard. Wasn't so hard. So while we were talking there, we touched briefly on fiber. So if I can, Deepak, I just want to talk about fiber a little bit, because fiber, we talk about something called the prebiotics. So we've got the probiotics of the bacteria, then we've got the prebiotics. So prebiotics are the fiber. And the reason this fiber is so important is they're actually the food for your microbe. Your microbes need fiber. So the more refined your diet is, the more likely you are at not feeding the microbes, and the microbes dying because they don't have food. Like, you can't sustain them. So they eat this prebiotic fiber, which is soluble and insoluble fiber. And one of the byproducts of this process of them eating this fiber is that they produce something called a short chain fatty acid. So short chain fatty acids are really, really important because they reduce inflammation. To see how it all works together. We wipe out the microbes, we don't give them fiber. That causes the microbes to diminish and deplete. They're not producing the short chain fatty acids. We're no longer protecting the lining of the gut. So it's just a matter of time until we have a leaky gut or gut permeability. In fact, there are a lot of the alternative practitioners out there who will tell you that they believe that at least 50% of the population has leaky gut. Obviously, depending on who you're talking to, we're now going to go to mainstream medical and they're going to say, oh, what a lot of nonsense, man. I've never heard of that. But they can't explain why autoimmune diseases are increasing the way that they are. They just, oh, it is what it is. It doesn't work that way for me. Like, if you see a progression, go and do the research. And thank God for us, we've got people like Zach Bush out there. I mean, I'm sure you know Dr. Zach Bush. He's been phenomenal in explaining to us and showing us the trajectory. Hey guys, look, here it is. This is where we brought in the GMOs. Here we started spraying the food with poison. And the guys, when they brought out the GMOs and the glyphosates, they said that we mustn't worry. It's not going to affect us as humans because we don't have something called a shikimate pathway. So the shikimate pathway is part of the digestive pathway for the microbes or bugs. Well, they weren't looking at bugs at the time, they looked at insects. I said, well, we don't have a shikimate pathway. It's not a problem for us. But our microbes have a shikimate pathway. And that specific process damages them, and they therefore can't protect us.
Yeah, Zach Bush, I've recently come across his work and it's absolutely amazing. He goes right into first principles and he explains it in such a nice way that a layman, because I'm not a medical doctor or a scientist or expert like that, but I can understand what he's talking about.
And he's all about regenerative farming, Deepak. I don't know if you know, he was here last, I think it was last year, the year before. He's busy with something called Farmer's Footprint. And they are helping farmers to break free from the hold that the banks has over them, forcing them to continue to farm with GMOs. And they're slowly helping farmers to regenerate the land, to build up and grow food, which is now friend and not foe.
That is probably another whole discussion we can have if we go into farming, because I've got a big gripe with this single cultivar farming, hundreds of acres of just one plant and then the soil. But let's leave that for another discussion. Let's talk about let's talk about how we heal the gut, right? So you said prebiotics, which is food for the microbes. Probiotics is actually a collection of microbes, and that's what was in the kefir, right? So your kefir was rich in probiotics. Is there stuff we can do to actually fix the lining that gets damaged? How do we do that?
So the first thing we want to do is remove the damages, the guys that are causing the damage. So we need to remove the foods and behaviors which are causing the inflammation. So that would be very, very important, is to sit and think about what is perpetuating the damage. So I need to remove the inflammatory foods. So usually for most people, it would be dairy, not for everyone. But for many, many people, and when you're starting off on your healing journey, you want to just get rid of all the inflammatory guys. That would be your dairy, your gluten, corn, genetically modified corn. So with my daughter, when she was originally sick, and then I also saw it with my little boy, who at the time was only 2 or 3. Every single time he ate cornflakes, he had a stomach ache. This is how, when I started waking up, I was like, this is so interesting. Every time they eat this, they get a tummy ache. This specific food. Why is it this specific food? And we all love cornflakes. But then I went and did the research, and most corn in South Africa is genetically modified. Most of it. So every time I eat something that is inflammatory, I prevent the microbes, or I kill the microbes, and the microbes can't heal the lining. Then in terms of healing the lining, there are a couple of things we can do after we remove the inflammatory causing foods. Is a lot of people can do a protocol with bone broth. So bone broth is very popular for actually helping to heal the gut. This becomes a problem, however, if you are a vegan or a vegetarian. And in extreme cases, the practitioners will often ask the vegan or the vegetarian, would you please consider using the bone broth for 3 to 6 weeks, but don't think of it as bone broth, think of it as medicine. We have to heal the lining. We need to give the cells the food they need so that they can actually start building and healing. And that comes from amino acids, that comes from things like bone broth or collagen. So it's often difficult for vegans and vegetarians to heal that lining if they're not willing to take the amino acids. I'm not a vegan and a vegetarian, so I can't give advice there. That has to be each one personally. We did come across a mushroom called snow fungus. So snow fungus behaves very much like a collagen. If you, for example, break it up and put it in a soup, it's going to give you that similar kind of effect. And we actually one of the first gut powders we did with NUMESA was a gut powder called Gut Build, which was specifically where I put in the snow fungus. So I put in the prebiotics, I put in the probiotics from the kefir, and I put in the snow fungus. I was like, come on, guys, let's try and heal this lining. And we had some good results there with that. So we need to reduce the inflammation causing issues. We need to support the lining, and then we need to put the probiotics. So if we can just talk briefly about probiotics. So you can get probiotic in supplements. So the way I understand it, the labs take the cultures, they isolate 1 or 2 probiotics, and then they grow it in the lab, that specific culture. But if I want to come back to the garden or the forest, it's about diversity. One is not going to fix the problem. I need as many different kinds. So if people are taking probiotics in a supplement form, please, you need to change it every 3 months at least. Mix it up, take different kinds. You want to have as many different kinds of bacteria or probiotic coming in as possible. Do not take the same probiotic indefinitely, but it's far better for you to take a fermented food. Fermented foods are amazing, but we got rid of them because we all got fridges. We didn't need to ferment our foods for longevity. We could actually just put it in the fridge and who cares? But those fermentation practices and processes had a lot of beneficial microbes, and those microbes are what preserved the food. So if you look, for example, at a kimchi or a sauerkraut, they are both fermented, and those are natural fermentations that we're not even using a culture there. And you've usually got about 3 to 6 different beneficial microbes, probiotics, and the fiber in the veggie is your prebiotics. So now you've got your pre and your probiotic. How much do I need? 1 tablespoon. 1 tablespoon. Oh, I don't like how it tastes. Tough shit. You know what? Put 1 tablespoon of that kimchi or sauerkraut on top of your plate of food. You're not even going to notice it's there. But your gut is going to notice it's there, and it's going to be super grateful. Then we go into something like a kombucha. So kombucha's got some probiotics. It's got a lot of digestive enzymes. So kombucha is exceptionally helpful for taking with a meal or before a meal. Kombucha is really, really helpful for people who have a lot of reflux. So if we can come back to the reflux just now, Deepak, because that one is really, really interesting. So kombucha is really, really good for digestion. A lot of people find kombucha helps them with joint pain because, again, we're increasing the stomach acid, we're helping the digestion, we're reducing the load on the colon. And then yogurt. So yogurt is good and bad. Yogurt is good and bad. Yogurt was good. Yogurt was good when milk was real. Yogurt was good when bacteria were actually being used, and yogurt was great when there were no artificial sweeteners being added to the yogurt. Oh, look at this lovely gut product. I'm going to put artificial sweeteners in here, which are going to destroy all the microbes. So basically, I'm eating a dessert, a processed dairy dessert that is causing gut issues, skin issues, and major sinus. We see major sinus with the little ones. So the parents are putting that little yogurt in there, believing that they are helping their kids, but the yogurt is pointless because it's got sweeteners, it's got flavors, it's ultra processed, and there's no longer any beneficial bacteria. And then, of course, my favorite is kefir. Why is kefir my favorite? Because of the strains. When you are drinking kefir, and yes, you can come to a company like us, NUMESA, and there's lots of amazing companies that are out there making authentic kefir, and this is important. Okay, you have authentic kefir made with live cultures where we have the multi-strain. How many different types of bacteria can I put in? So a water kefir averages about 15, anywhere between 15 and 30 strains of beneficial bacteria. And milk kefir traditionally around the world has anywhere from 30 to 60 different beneficial bacterias and yeasts. So now you're coming that forest and you're like, here we go, guys. Here's lots and lots of different plants, and all the plants do different things, and they all work together, and the body's happy. Versus I go to the pharmacy, I buy a probiotic, it's a 6 strain, and then I keep feeding myself the same 6 strain instead of bringing in diversity. Diversity is vitally, vitally important. And then we've got to feed those guys. We are all fiber deficient. Everybody's fiber deficient because of the processing of the foods. We need the fiber. So I'm taking the probiotics, but I'm not feeding them the fiber. I still haven't got the balance right. So we do need to balance out that microbiome, and fermented foods are the way to do it. And mix it up. You know, you can have a little bit of kefir in your smoothie, maybe you have some friends around later and you've got some deliciously fermented water kefir. Before the meal, you maybe have a little bit of kombucha, or apple cider vinegar is also amazing for helping with digestion. These are food is our friend, or should be our friend.
So I wanted to touch on the science and the labs. I get very worried as soon as I hear people are doing things in the lab because I've learned for myself, I just want whole foods. I want natural foods. I don't want some scientist doing something in a lab and growing things that just makes me very uncomfortable. And the whole foods is what I prefer. So when you mentioned the kombucha, which is naturally fermented, you got to use the SCOBY, or you got the kefir grains, or other products that are naturally made. I feel a lot more comfortable. When someone is selling me some probiotic supplement in a pill, I don't know. I don't have any proof, or I don't have any evidence or research.
But your gut says so. But your gut says so, Deepak. Your gut. I mean, we talk about. I've got an intuition. I've got a gut feeling. That are those live microbes that I was talking about. Those are the same ones I was talking about that in terms of consciousness. Like if you won't have a gut feeling if you don't have the gut microbes because they're also tuned in and plugged in and connected to source. They're also working for your benefit. So they're going to tell you something is not okay. And if you are taking an isolated probiotic, well then you better than nothing. It's better than nothing. When we go into retailers, so for 10 years, I've been selling kefir into a space that has not been welcoming, I must tell you. They don't know what I'm talking about. Excuse me. Most people don't know what I'm talking about. And I'm explaining that this food does this and it's beneficial to you like that. And I'm selling against products which are made differently. So I make a live kefir using live cultures, the way it's been done for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. But it doesn't make it a shelf stable product. No. Making real true kefir and kombucha is something you should probably be doing in your home for yourself so that you're also bringing in the microbes from your local environment, which are going to take part in that fermentation. If you are going into a factory space where you are using isolated cultures, for example, if you are making cheeses and other products, you will have to use a kefir sample that has none of the beneficial yeasts because you won't want to risk that your other foods become affected or influenced, or they might use the word contaminated by the other bacteria and the yeast because that's going to affect their cheese, for example. So then they'll bring you in a 3 to 6 strain probiotic kefir that is a lot more shelf stable, but it's not too much different to taking a probiotic off the shelf because you've only got the 6 strain. And then you've got the guy on the other side, which is the delicious double creamy, extra thick, whatever yogurt. They're divine. Don't get me wrong. They're super delicious, but there's no health benefits. If anything, they're actually going to make me more sick.
So let's go into the what you eat because you mentioned earlier about acid reflux. And I did a podcast about 2 months ago about exactly that, acid reflux. I had a guest on my show and he spoke about how doctors treat acid reflux. Obviously, first you take the Eno and Gaviscon, but if your acid reflux becomes more persistent and chronic, you go to the doctor. They give you something called a PPI, a proton pump inhibitor. Now, this just really blew my mind and got me really angry. But the proton pump inhibitor shuts off your acid pump in your stomach. There's a little pump in your stomach that secretes acid and it's regulating it. So the doctors say, "Oh, you got acid reflux. Well, we'll just shut off the acid pump." And then this guest of mine explained, like, over years, this PP of taking PPIs, they started developing more issues and side effects. And they noticed that when they went and made number two, there would be a lot of undigested food in their stools. And yeah, I mean, it's just crazy for me that this is how they treat it, and it's got such worse issues for the patient. So, what did you want to talk about on acid reflux?
E- Exactly that. So I didn't know about your show, and I'm very, very glad that you had that person on the show. So I see a lot of acid reflux, I see a lot of heartburn, and I see a lot of people on PPIs. And you know, the proton pump function is not just in the stomach. There are a lot of other cells in your body that need that specific process. So by taking your PPIs, you are reducing other cellular function other than just in this space. But something that's very important to understand with acid reflux and heartburn, which is a huge industry, let me just tell you, it is huge. Okay. So firstly, as we age, the stomach acid starts to decline. Okay, so a lot of us by about 35, 40, we need to start helping our body by doing the shots of apple cider vinegar with our meal, or taking a digestive enzyme, or maybe a little bit of kombucha. Let's help to increase the stomach acids, not decrease them. So now we're complaining, I've got a lot of reflux, there must be too much acid. The little valve that actually stops the stomach acid from coming through into the esophagus, the higher the acid, the tighter the valve. The lower the acid, the looser the valve. So if I'm now taking stuff to suppress the stomach acid, that valve is just going to keep opening. Okay, so that's our first problem. So we got the valve is not closing, we're reducing the stomach acid. Now in your small intestine, so you've got this huge amount of acid that should be happening. Now the food's traveling through from the stomach into the small intestine. In the small intestine, if we don't have enough acid and digestive enzymes, etc., actually um, breaking the food down. When it gets to the small intestine, we now have a mess up with the bacteria. So it used to be that you'd only hear about SIBO, which is small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, sometimes. We're now seeing more and more SIBO. Oh my God, SIBO is terrible. What do we do? Oh no, we have to kill it with 3 types of antibiotic. This is the next step. No, no, we need to increase the stomach acid, let the stomach break the food down like it's designed to, put the probiotics in there, let them break the food down so it can travel through the stomach. So some of the side effects of low stomach acid would be the increase in SIBO. Secondly, the burning of the esophagus. The other problems we have with food not breaking down and there not being enough stomach acid is a whole selection of sicknesses that we won't think are related to that specific process. But it's going to, just like, because everything is related, as soon as the one goes out, everything starts to go out. We're reducing the bacteria, we're adding to the leaky gut, we're bringing up the inflammation. So a really, really interesting thing, Deepak, is that, you know, all the obesity we're seeing, a lot of that obesity is actually chronic inflammation. So your body will actually put the fat around, especially your organs in the top and middle section. Your body will start to pack fat around that in an effort to try and protect. And also because our diets are so high in excess carbohydrates or sugars, we've got too much insulin and the body doesn't know what to do with it. So it stores it in this fat. And now we see that people are getting bigger and bigger, but they're more malnourished than ever before. And stress is a big part of that. So stress, you know, we talk about the stress belly. People that are highly stressed and are not doing meditation, they're not doing mindfulness, they're not exercising, they're not breathing, they're not probioticing, they just get fatter and fatter. And they'll tell you, yeah, I have a lot of stress, I can't do this. But what they don't realize is that stress is also making them sick. The stress is also damaging the microbes. The stress is also damaging the lining. And the process of healing is taking responsibility for, what do I put in my mouth? What do I listen to? What do I see? What do I speak? How do I think? How do I breathe? You know, when you get well, it's a whole process. So I could do an assessment with you, a gut health assessment with you, and say, okay, look, these are your triggers. It's always going to be the same thing. Let's remove the dairy and the gluten and the processed foods and the sugar. Okay, let's reduce the inflammation. Let's breathe properly. If we're not breathing properly, you know this. If we are not breathing from the diaphragm, that diaphragm pushes the organs, you know, down. It heats it up. We need heat. How are you going to process all of this food if you don't have enough heat? So if that diaphragm's not moving up and down, we're not squishing and massaging the organs, we're not creating the heat, we're staying in a fight or flight response. So that simple process of breathing and moving that diaphragm up or down takes us into sympathetic or parasympathetic. Such a simple thing. Just our breath helps us to process and deal with life. So we need to reduce the inflammation, need to increase the breathing. We've got to move the body. We have to move the body, even if it's just walking. You have to move your body or you can't reduce inflammation. You can't change your thinking. You know, the stinking thinking comes from sitting there with chronic constipation. You'll know, as someone who's had constipation in your past, by day 3 or 4, the bitch level is high, high, like your aggravation, your irritation, the way you speak to those around you. I meet people with chronic constipation, and I'm on a lot of groups, IBS and constipation groups, where I'm trying to always just give information. But these people tell you stories 4, 5, 6, 7 days. I've met people who go to the toilet twice a month. Eat 3 times a day and you go to the toilet twice a month. Where does it go? And every cell in your body also has a waste process. Never mind what you're eating. The cells that are keeping you alive, your mitochondria, your growing, your fixing, your healing, every process has a waste process. How do we remove the waste? Well, that's going to come from the breathing and the exercising. If we are not breathing and we're not moving, how are we going to get rid of those toxins? So I think we have to ask ourselves the question, do we want to die? And sometimes I'm very harsh with people. You know, you talk and you talk and they moan, but they don't want to do anything. Then somebody's going to ask them, well, what's your longevity plan? When are you planning to die? How sick do you want to be when you die? How inflamed do you want to be? What do you have grandchildren? Do you have children? Do you hope to play with your grandchildren? Because if you keep eating the way you're eating, if you keep inflaming the body the way that you are, your last 10, 15, 20 years doesn't look pretty. It's painful, it's uncomfortable. You're taking a lot of drugs. And I think for many people, they've just accepted that that is their portion and they're okay with that. And that's cool. We respect each being's option. But I know that that is not what we are called to do, and that is not how we were designed. And therefore, I would like very much for us to bring this information so people realize they can actually be free and they can get well.
Yeah, I think, Bronwen, the most important thing I think out of this podcast is you can heal your gut, and there's a certain process to do it, and it is relatively easy. Well, maybe let me use a different word. It's relatively simple. It's a simple process, but it might not be easy because we're so conditioned to a different system and lifestyle. But the process is so simple, and you said basically remove the foods that are damaging the gut, put in prebiotics, probiotics to help the gut microbes, and then put in bone broth, collagen, that stuff to heal the gut lining. I mean, it's really that simple, isn't it? But people don't want to do that. So I wanted to talk about. Oh, yeah, carry on.
No, no, no. What's interesting is even though I've been doing this for 10 years, so for 10 years this has been my living, I still go around the mountain with food because I go to places, and this is something I plan to address in 2025, is I go to places where I meet friends and family and I can't eat the food. So what do? I eat something I'm not supposed to because I want to hang out with my friends. I want to be with my family. Oh, you don't have gluten-free on the menu. Okay, have you got a this? No, I don't have a this. Have you got a that? No. Okay. So I'll end up eating something non-nutritious or non-delicious because I can't get the foods. If I go to a forecourt, if I'm traveling home, it's late, I haven't had a chance to eat, and I stop to buy something, how many places can I stop and buy something that I can eat that's not going to hurt me? And sometimes, yeah, and sometimes you'll have 2 or 3 of those crazy days and you'll end up eating junk. And then when you look again, your junk food consumption's gone high because you're like, oh, well, I cheated yesterday. I cheated yesterday. So what's one more day? And then we screw up until we feel really shitty and then we start again. And then we have to go through the whole de-inflammatory process. So if for someone like me who knows better, if I still screw up, for the person starting the journey, it can be very intimidating. I recommend you sort out your why. Why am I doing this? Why do I want to feel better? For me, my why is brain fog. The dirtier I eat, the slower my brain is. And I don't like that. I really don't like being slow. I don't like when my brain doesn't work. Uh, Brain fog is real. Brain fog is a very, very, very real side effect of an imbalanced gut microbiome. And that is why I come back to my healthy eating. But for new people, it'll be hard. It will be hard. They need to know it's going to take them a bit of time. It's not an overnight thing.
That is so relevant you mentioned that because I struggle with this exact same problem, especially when I'm traveling or when I'm hanging out with my friends. You go to a restaurant, and it's even more exasperated for me because I'm also vegan. And if you go to any restaurant, I mean, their vegan dishes are awful. They might be vegan, but nutritionally, they are terrible. I mean, I've gone through all the vegan meals at the restaurant. I mean, I don't know how people eat that stuff, but
Yeah, you let them eat. I'll just have the chips. Are they real chips? No. Flip. Okay, can I have a lettuce leaf? No, we don't have those either. Okay, cool. I'll just drink soda water.
I know, but then you can't do that because you look odd and everyone's like, what's wrong with you? So you end up eating something. You got to eat something, right?
I have a plan. I have a plan. We'll talk about it offline. Maybe you can give me some advice on how to get these places to at least have 1 or 2 nice, friendly vegan meals.
Yeah, and proper ones. Anyway, I wanted to talk about one example, one last example of a family member of mine who had long-term acid reflux. And I don't know if you've had similar cases. So it was actually my dad. So my dad had acid reflux, heartburn for decades, like, I don't know, 30 years or something. Not every day, but maybe once or twice a week, he would have the heartburn. He'll pop the Eno, and life goes on. Anyway, 30 years of doing this, he got a severe pain in his chest area here. Rushed to the hospital. Hospital did their scans and everything, and they said your gallbladder. They're telling my dad your gallbladder is full of gallstones, like full of gallstones. And they said we have to cut out the gallbladder. We've got to get it out because it's a huge risk. And they had actually scheduled his surgery. So then I heard about this like a few days before the surgery was about to take place, and I was like, whoa, 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 hold your horses. You can't just cut out the gallbladder. But then my parents told me, don't worry, we've got an uncle who doesn't have a gallbladder, and the doctor said it's like a small procedure, and they do like hundreds of these a week. It's no big deal. But I was like, no, stop. Let me just try my approach. So I did 3 things for my dad. I gave him some herbal tinctures. So I gave him milk thistle dandelion, which immediately, within 2 days, his pain stopped. The pain that he was having for 30 years, heartburn, it immediately stopped. Then I put him on the Rife machine. I've got a Rife machine since frequency. So every week he would come for Rife treatment specifically for gallbladder. And then I did a third thing, which is a gallbladder liver flush. And I got this from an old homeopathic teacher. There's a whole procedure, but the end of the procedure, you drink like half a liter of lemon juice and olive oil or something. And the next day, you go and have diarrhea. And my dad did this, and the next day in his stool were hundreds and hundreds of small little green balls floating in his stool, and that was the gallstones. So, so luckily my dad still has his gallbladder. He's got zero pain now. I mean, it's been a year later. But is gallstones like a side effect of, I don't know, not treating your acid reflux for decades? That can happen.
Well, look, everything is connected. Everything is connected. A couple of years ago, I came across the coffee enema. I'm sure you've heard of the Gerson therapy coffee enema to clean the liver and the gallbladder. So you would get some organic coffee. You would do an enema. If anybody is thinking about doing it, I do recommend you do a water enema first, because trying to hold that coffee in for 15 minutes is going to be real tough otherwise. But what happens is you hold that coffee, you keep the coffee in the stomach for 15 minutes. And at about 15 minutes, you will literally feel the gallbladder and the hepatic duct go psh, psh, as it clears it out. So the acidity, the reduction of the acidity. There's another bug that gets involved often with the reflux is a bug called H. pylori, which if you go to the doctor, he'll say you've got H. pylori, he tests it. It's one of those ones we all have H. pylori. So if you test us for H. pylori, we'll all test positive. The medical way of sorting it out is a 3 or 4 week process of 3 or 4 antibiotics. Can you imagine what you're doing to the gut? Whereas you can actually just regulate it. You increase that stomach acid with your digestive enzymes, your apple cider vinegars, etc. You get that stomach acid up, and then the food starts to digest, and the gallbladder can work, because the gallbladder and the liver are working together. We're processing fats. If we don't have enough stomach acid, how are we going to break down the fats? Think about it. So some guys might manifest as a gallbladder issue, some will manifest as a stomach ulcer. Like you have different manifestations depending on the person's makeup. But gallbladders, I don't think, need to be cut out. And if you could fix that in a week or two, I've met young girls at 16 or 17, their gallbladders have been removed. For whole life they're going to be struggling. We need the gallbladder. The gallbladder can be fixed. Instead of just racing and cutting it out, let's address the whole digestive system. Why don't they have us in schools doing really, really interesting talks where we explain how does this work? You're going to be eating for your whole life. Surely understanding your digestive system from a holistic point would be way more beneficial than some of the other rubbish they teach us at school.
So I wanted to, as we're closing off, we're getting to the end of our podcast. I wanted to just touch on your gut association. What did you call it? The Gut Health Association?
So what we've done with the Gut Health Association is we've made it really, really simple. To be a member of the Gut Health Association, your products or services need to do primarily 3 things. 1, not damage the microbiome of the host. We would be the host. The microbiome is what's in our bacteria. Number 2, they must not damage the lining of the stomach. And number 3, we ask that they don't damage the macrobiome. So we want to work with companies who are conscious in the small and in the big. And as we started gathering the people together, all of us with the same voice, we need to educate. We need to teach as many people as we possibly can the same things that we know about repairing and restoring and reducing the inflammation and seeding the gut. So that is really the crux of it. And also, one little person with one little company running, trying to make a difference is hard work. But by us joining together and collaborating and saying, let us go together, let's educate together, let's stand together, let us go to market together. Because again, the singular doesn't get us very far, but the collective becomes a lot easier to walk together. So not only do we help the public, by educating them on the importance of gut health. We also help our members by joining together and working together. And we're actually in the process at the moment of submitting our application to the Department of Health to have our gut friendly logo verified and certified. So you can't just put anything on your packaging. You actually have to have permission. So we've created a little gut friendly logo which we would like to have on all products that meet those three criteria to help somebody who's on a gut health journey identify. Because when you first start picking up those products, when you start on this journey and you pick up that product and you turn it around and you're like, oh God, I don't know what I'm supposed to eat. I don't know what's friend. I don't know what's foe. It makes it hard. So we're hoping that by putting that gut-friendly logo for people who are starting on the journey, it makes it easy for them to identify the products that are friend and avoid those that are dangerous. And we want them to have a place where they can come and find information, find products, find companies and services who align with helping us to protect and educate on the importance of the gut microbiome. So that's really the idea behind the Gut Health Association of South Africa.
Amazing. So this is very useful for the public, right? Because, like you mentioned, the public are not educated and they're living their lives. They look at a packet, it might say gluten free, and they take it, but it might not be friendly for your, it might be gluten free, but it might not be friendly for your gut, right? Or something can be dairy free, but it might still have something that's not good for your gut.
And a lot of them are crooks. Deepak, they're crooks. And I'm not going to mention a name, but yesterday the day before, I went to a fruit and vegetable shop, a big one, and I bought myself a poke bowl, prawn poke bowl. Never had one before. And I was like, look at all these vegetables in here. This is going to be fantastic. And I ate it and it was very sweet, but I was like, okay, this is cool. And I turned it upside down, and on the bottom of the container was the ingredients. Because on the top of the container, it just gave me the basic ingredients. But when I turned it upside down, I found two sweeteners, MSG. There were three or four toxic ingredients in a perfectly good bowl that did not require them to put poison in it. Why did they poison me? Why did they poison me? And what I would like in the future is for, as the association, for us to potentially go to places like that and ask them, why have you taken a perfectly good food, a perfectly good bowl, and made it non-gut friendly when it could have been gut friendly? And I don't know that the retailers, the doctors, the buyers are aware yet. And hopefully, over the years, as we grow and our membership becomes stronger, we can go to these people and make them aware of the importance of giving us foods that are friendly and to stop poisoning us, because I don't think they're doing it on purpose, but they're doing it.
I'm so glad you're doing this because this would have helped my journey in a huge way. So I also did a podcast 2 weeks ago about misleading labels, and this is a big gripe of mine. Like all these labels, especially like for example sugar free. Like they're saying sugar free because everyone wants to avoid diabetes and they don't want to get insulin resistant or whatever. So sugar is now the big culprit. So they've got all these sugar free products. But from my research, I know the artificial sweetener or the common one is aspartame. Aspartame is like so toxic. Pineal gland damage, pituitary gland damage.
Like joint pain, if you have aspartame and you've got any kind of inflammation, your joints will ache afterwards. And it does still mess up the insulin, by the way.
Yes, exactly. But it might not trigger your diabetes or the diabetes person doesn't get affected. I don't know, but that's what they've sold it as, and that's why people are taking the artificial sweeteners in their coffee and drinking the Coke Zeros and all these things. So I've got a big gripe with misleading labels because they're writing this label telling me that this food is good for me, but they don't tell you about all the other poisons in there. So this misleading labels and what you're doing to sort of eradicate this labeling thing that the whole industry is going on. Yeah, that would be so amazing.
So for example, there's a regulatory group called DAF, Department of Agricultural, Food and Forestry. So if I make a dairy product, I have to conform to their standards and their rules. So I make a kefir. It's a full cream milk kefir. It is full of probiotics. I can prove there are probiotics in there, but I may not use the word probiotic on my label. Okay, I'm not allowed to. Some or other rules, some medical guys have now taken the word and I may not use it. But like you said, there's some other product that's sitting next to mine on the shelf, which makes all these sugar-free, da 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 da. But there's nothing on there telling me that that product is actually going to really damage my gut microbiome. So by us doing this process with getting the gut-friendly logo approved, we want to be able to help the consumer identify this one is friend. But we've got a long, long journey ahead of us, and we have a lot of unconscious individuals that will hopefully wake up. I think there's enough shifting happening at the moment that there should be mass awakenings, I pray, in the retail space too soon. But yeah, it's real. It's very real. And the people stay sick and they stay poisoned and they keep buying in.
So I understand completely. I mean, my wife doesn't buy into this whole gut thing, so she doesn't really agree with it, and it's like too complicated and too difficult. So my daughter has, the Rice Krispies and milk in the morning, and she has her yogurt, and she has her cheese, and she has her bread, and she has all these things, which make me very aggravated. But I've like learned to like, okay, just let it go. But one thing you mentioned, she's always phlegmy. She's always, all the time, like phlegm, clogged nose, coughing up phlegm, coughing all the time. And I make her homeopathic remedies, so it helps to just manage it. But it's constant. And I'm sure it's all the stuff that you mentioned throughout our whole talk now, all the stuff that's getting into her gut, damaging her gut microbe, damaging her gut lining, somehow causing phlegm in her system. And yeah, it's just a constant.
And if you maybe you can ask your wife just to do an experiment with you. So just for 3 weeks, just cut the dairy. See, maybe try a lactose free because you can get a lactose free dairy. Just be careful of your nut milks and things because they are 1% almond or 2% almond and 3 or 4 inflammatory ingredients. That's what I'm watching. I'm watching this nut milk space now. I'm like, hold on, guys. You're removing the dairy, but you're adding 3 other inflammatory products along the line. It's easy enough to make a nut milk at home. Rather go with 100% coconut cream. That's at least coconut cream and is not containing the other inflammatory oils, seed oils, etc. Um, but maybe she'll try for 3 weeks, and at the end of the 3 weeks, you guys will have a conversation about it, and your child's snot will be gone, pretty much guaranteed. You know what? She's young. Remember, the toxicity only shows up as we age. So we do have a lot of sick kids, especially the overly vaccinated kids or the kids that are exposed to things that are going to compromise their immune systems. The healthy kids may last a bit longer before they start getting sick, but if they're eating these foods, it's just a matter of time. And whether it manifests as learning disorders or skin issues or allergies or ear infections or bladder infections or constipations, all comes back to what are they putting in the mouth.
Amazing. Bronwen, this was such an amazing chat. We have come to the end of our podcast. It was so informative. To all the people watching, I'm going to leave all of Bronwen's links to her NUMESA, to her gut bar, to the Gut Health Association. It's all going to be below the video here, so you can check it out. She's all over socials. She's very active. Her products are literally everywhere. I've seen it at all the sort of health shops around, Fresh Earth and Jackson's and a lot of little small shops. I don't know how you get your product all over the place, but it's really amazing. So you can find it. Bronwyn, any closing words?
I think just to encourage people to take it one day at a time, but to choose, to find a reason to be healthy, to find a reason to live. and then to embrace it with both hands and journey and find friends along the way. And don't accept being poisoned every day. It's not really supposed to be your portion. We're supposed to live in wellness and health and happiness and have a good mental state of mind. And don't believe that everybody with a pretty bright box is your friend. They're not. Thank you, Deepak, for creating this platform and for having these conversations.
No, we love having guests with so much information, like you coming on our show and sharing this information so freely, because people need to know this. And with education, we can really change the trajectory of our lives. So, on that note, Bronwen, thank you so much. Till next time, ciao for now.
Cheers, bye.